team for a little bit of a conversation around giving you a few ideas to think about how you would build out cognitive diversity in your team, in your organisation. Or maybe to challenge you to think about whether you actually have a cognitively diverse team already or not. So one of the first things we do is we introduce a little bit of language, and then we'll have a little bit of fun thinking about how this language works. So when we think about cognitive diversity, we just think about preferences and thinking styles. And we have some words that we use to describe those. I'll very quickly whiz through this, but you might think about things like someone who's extroverted. Don't think about it in the context of how society talks to extroverted and introverted. You know, this isn't the person who's drunk 4 bottles of wine and is under the desk at the moment. That's not what we mean by extroverted. By extroverted, we mean someone who's actually comfortable being expressive. They probably do get their energy from being in a social environment with other people, but that's their natural preference. That's the way they prefer to see the world. We talk about outcome focus, mentioned that earlier. People maybe who are much more comfortable being logical. They might be quite comfortable being candid, actually. We talk about people who are discipline driven. If you're going on your family holiday, are you the person who actually wants an itinerary of what you're doing on your... Oh, there's one in the room. You're the person who wants an itinerary, or maybe you've got the bucket list and you want to make sure that you address all of those areas on the bucket list. Absolutely fantastic. The opposite of it, which we'll look at in a moment, is inspiration-driven. Someone who's much more comfortable going with the flow. I was using this example with one of your colleagues last night, and they were talking about, yeah, let's wait and we'll just book the ticket and we'll fly down there and we'll see what's available when we get there. Lastminute.com on steroids. And just different preferences. If you're anything like me, your significant other probably I drive her mad because I'm kind of in the lastminute.com piece, and she's in the, can we just book a holiday, please? Can we please have a date when we're going to go, because it kind of affects our lives? And I'm like, yeah, we'll get round to it, you know. And that's kind of how our dynamic works. But it's kind of cool because we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, so we kind of found a way to make it work, but it's not always easy. So we talk about discipline-driven, we talk about down-to-earth. People who just prefer to process information and data, and actually would much rather look at the facts, consider and analyse. Again, don't use the social description of introverted. The social description of introverted is there something in business management circles that kind of thinks that introverted is, you don't want any introverts, or why would they be in the room? The power of introversion is amazing. But think about introversion in that person who's just really good at maybe being a bit more reflective thinker, who can consider things, and then it's processing and comes back with the answer to the problem we've all been jabbering on about for 30 minutes and no one actually got there. Because they've been reflective. They tend to get their energy more from being in small groups rather than large groups. We think about people who are people-focused. It's the opposite to outcome-focused. Outcome-focused gets the job done by logic. Kid, let's just do it. Sometimes you might call it JFDI, just flipping do it. Yeah? People focused tend to do it through collaborating with others. That's their preference. They'll get the job done through collaborating with others. Inspiration driven I talked about, and then the opposite of down to earth is big picture thinking. So people who actually are really comfortable working without the data. They're just working in the ideas space, or they're very good at sitting at the 40,000 foot level and bringing lots of strands together. Okay? So as we've gone through that circle, you may have recognized some of those preferences in yourself or in some of your team members. Again, when we do this with teams, it's not about right, wrong, good or bad, and it's not that any of us are any one thing. We have a mix of these, but we have a preference typically towards certain ones of them. But I just want you to cast your mind into one of your fun management meetings, or one of your team meetings that you've had, where you've started to work with people, and maybe you've had one of those tense moments where you've gone, why don't they get it? Or you've just gone, I'm checking out of this because they're just talking absolute gibberish and I can't be bothered to listen to them anymore. I'm sure that never happens in any of your organisations, but it does sometimes in some organisations. So let's play a little game of what happens when two worlds collide. So we're going to think maybe about, Let's do a simple one, you've got someone who really prefers to be extroverted in the room and someone who really prefers to be introverted in the room. What does that look like? Oh, we've got two of them sitting next to each other. Oh, we're going to share some real world experiences, shall we? So, okay, this is... Linda's now having a panic attack because she told me I couldn't do this. So, if we had two people in the room, and again, look through the lens of it's not good or bad, it's not right or wrong, it's just different ways of seeing the world. So when you have someone who's leaning more into that extroverted nature, working with someone who's leaning more into the introverted nature, what are the things that might happen?
Chaos.
Yeah? And then help them out, rest of the room. You've worked in environments, some of you will be quite extroverted, some of you will be quite introverted, or you've seen other people in that environment. What are the sort of things you observe when those two styles come together? One-sided conversation. Frustration. And it's interesting because do both sides get frustrated? Yeah. And what tends to play out in that situation, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pick on you anymore. I'm not. But what tends to happen in that situation is the extroverted person is being themselves. They're expressive, they're enthusiastic, they have a lot of information that they want to share. The introverted person is probably being more reflective. The challenge really comes when we talk about ideation and innovation is, does that mean the introverted person never actually gets the chance to put their ideas on the table? Could be. And that starts to constrain our ability to innovate. So that's one example. Let's pick another one. What happens if you have the contrast that I have when I plan holidays with my wonderful wife? So I'm big picture, inspiration driven. Oh, let's have an idea. And let's just kind of figure it out as we go along. And Helen is much more structured in her approach. She would like to have a plan. She'd like to know when it's going to happen. Now, I'm not going to give you any more insight into my marital bliss than that. I'm going to ask you to think about when you've seen that situation in your work environment, because I won't embarrass you by asking you about your family environment, but what are the sort of tensions that you see and maybe the downsides you see when that relationship happens, when you have people like that colliding in a room? Yeah? So we'll come to the benefits in a second. What sort of things might challenge that environment? What would be a challenge? Unrealistic expectations, yeah? Back to things like frustration. Do you ever have a situation where the planners in the room go, for heaven's sake, can you get off that cloud and talk about stuff that's real and we can actually deliver? Oh, there's a few nods. Some people in the room have had that experience. So that's the sort of conversations that we're having when we talk about two worlds collide. And it's not just in those dimensions, you know, even on the same sort of south of the border area, outcome focused, down to earth, we talk about red on blue management. So red on blue management is where an outcome focused person is, I want you to do this, this, this and this, and that's what I'm expecting from you, okay? Down to earth person who's probably a little bit less likely to challenge their boss when they say that, interprets that and goes away, beavers away for a week, comes up with the report, presents it to the boss, and the boss goes, what are you doing? That's not what I meant. I told you I want you to do this, this, this and this. Go away and do it. And what you get is this red on blue scenario where the person doing the work hasn't got the ability and isn't in a safe space to actually ask the challenging questions of the leader, who's being very direct, very candid, very JFDI, and so you just end up with a suboptimal solution all the time. So just a few examples of how this stuff works. So I'm going to wrap up at that point, but what I wanted to give you was just a sense of, if you're building an innovation culture, you have to think beyond the process and the tools. Innovation actually starts with getting people around the table who see the world in very different ways. It's not natural for us. As human beings, the way we have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years is with safety in mind. And safety has usually come when we were Neanderthal man on the tundra, has come with being in a tribe that had similar ideas. And so that's hard-coded into our DNA as a species. What we're trying to do, though, is create that ability to move into our rational brain, recognise that, and start to think about how do we bring people into that conversation who have very different ways of thinking and working. And that's not natural, so it has to be a conscious step. To make those steps, there's a few things that we have to do. First of all, we have to recognise our own preferences, that we see the world through our way of looking at it. It's not right or wrong, it's not good or bad, but I do see the world differently to you. And you see the world differently to the person next to you. So you have to start by recognising that. And then you have to value that difference. Recognise what's different in other people and embrace that. So this is what we call cognitive diversity. It's different demographic diversity. So we've done a lot of work around demographic diversity and recognising differences in gender, race, ethnicity. Still a long way to go, but we've made progress in that. But this is thinking about cognitive diversity, different thinking styles, different ways of looking at the world. And we need to recognise our own preferences and those of others and value the difference. The easiest thing when you're in a room, and I've been there myself, big picture thinking. One of my colleagues in one of the businesses I was running was a very down-to-earth person. And I spent about 3 years getting so fed up with it. Because every time I came up with a wacky new idea for our business, he would be, show me the market research. Where's the evidence that's going to work? And he had a fair point, but because I saw the world in such a different way, I couldn't see that point. And it took us to go through this process to actually understand the value in people who have very different ways of looking at something, contributing that to the dialogue pot so that we can come up with new ideas and new ways of working. And we have to find ways to encourage contribution from everyone in that room and adapt to that situation, because that's the only way that we're actually going to be truly innovative. I think I wrote down two comments that came out of today, which I thought were really interesting. First was Matthias, in your session this morning. You said, pretty much, this should be a good quote, you said, we have to come together to create new ideas. That's exactly what we have to do. We have to come together to create new ideas. And then Paolo, in his session after lunch, said, I posed the question, how do we come together to shape our industry? And for me, those are about being willing to embrace difference, embrace cognitive diversity, bring people around our tables that think very differently to the way we do, recognise that is not natural for us, and actually we have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because if we're going to solve the problems that we're facing, society, industry, wherever you want to go, we've got to do a shed load of stuff different to the way we do it now. And the only way we will do that differently is if we bring all the input, all the thoughts, all the preferences into the same room and don't just create those echo chambers. So that was the thought I wanted to leave you with. If you want to pick up the conversation, scan the QR code, that's my contact details. Thank you very much for your attention.
Artlist.io